They say life can change in a second, but for me it wasn't just 1 second. It was a week. 1 week. 7 days that turned my world from warmth to silence. From a home filled with love, to the back seat of my car. From a husband who held my hand every morning, to a headstone I visit alone. You see, I'm not just a grandma. I'm a woman who had a life, a love, a home, and I lost it all in the same week. My name is Margaret Louise Davis. I was married for 47 years. I lived in a small home on Maple Drive. I baked pies, I mended scraped knees, and I kissed my husband on the cheek every night before we turned out the lights. But one Monday morning, everything started to unravel. This is not just my story. It's a survival tale. Confession. A reminder that even in the deepest darkness, a spark can still flicker. So if you're reading this, maybe you've lost something too. Maybe you felt like the world forgot you. Let me tell you, I see you. And I'm here to tell you you're not alone. Before I continue this story, make sure you subscribe on this Grandma Story channel, and let me know where you're watching from the comments section. On Monday at 6:42 a.m., the phone rang loud, slicing through the quiet. I was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring my Harold his usual, 2 scoops of Folgers and just a splash of cream. Hello. I answered, still half smiling, still half asleep. Mrs. Davis? The voice was clinical. Sharp. It came from the hospital. Your husband collapsed this morning. Paramedics brought him in. He's in critical condition. My fingers went cold around the receiver. I don't remember dropping the coffee mug, but I remember the crash. I remember the smell of hot coffee spilling across the linoleum floor. 20 minutes later, I was speeding down Route 7 in my old Dodge. My hands were shaking on the wheel, and my lips wouldn't stop whispering his name. Harold, please stay with me. Please. I hadn't prayed in years. But that morning I screamed every prayer I ever knew inside my head. When I burst into the ER, the nurse had that look. The kind that tells you the world is shifting. He's stable for now. But it was a massive heart attack, she said. They let me into the ICU. And there he was. My Harold. Pale. Tubes in his mouth. Machines beeping. His strong hands, the ones that held mine through 5 decades, lay limp by his side. I leaned in close. Baby, it's me. Margaret. I'm here. He didn't move. But I swear. I saw a tear roll down the side of his cheek. I stayed with him all day. I didn't eat. I didn't call anyone. I just held his hand and whispered every memory I could think of into his ear. That night, the nurse brought me a blanket. I curled up in the corner chair of the hospital room. I kept my eyes on the rise and fall of his chest. Steady, then slower, then steady again. I didn't know it yet, but I was already saying goodbye. The lights in the ICU never dimmed. They just buzzed. Cold, constant, and cruel. I sat in that corner chair all night, wrapped in a scratchy hospital blanket, too afraid to sleep. Every beep from the monitor sent a jolt through my chest. Every breath Harold took felt like a borrowed one. The man lying in that bed was not the Harold I married. His skin, once so full of warmth, looked paper-thin. His lips were cracked. But his hand still knew mine. Even with all those wires, he found a way to squeeze my fingers like he was telling me, I'm still here. I'm fighting. A young doctor with tired eyes came in around sunrise. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mrs. Davis, your husband suffered a major myocardial infarction. A heart attack of this size. Well, it's going to be a long road. I nodded, but my heart was screaming, just save him. I don't care how long the road is, just don't take him from me. They wouldn't let me stay while they ran more tests. So I stood in the hallway watching strangers walk past me. Nurses pushing carts, families crying in corners, doctors calling codes over the intercom. The world felt paused. My world had narrowed down to one hospital bed. One man. One heartbeat. When they finally let me back in, he was awake. Just barely. His eyes fluttered open. Those same soft brown eyes I first fell for at the roller rink back in 1971. Hey baby, I whispered, pressing a trembling kiss to his forehead. You gave me one hell of a scare. He smiled faintly. That crooked grin of his. Maggie. That was all he could say. But it was enough to split me in two. He drifted in and out the rest of the day. Sometimes he'd wake and whisper little things. Remember our beach trip? Or, you still make the best meatloaf. Even once, don't let them take the house. I froze when he said that. What do you mean, baby? I asked. But his eyes had already closed again. That night I sat by the bed and stared at the clock as it ticked through another hour I couldn't get back. I thought of the porch we built together. The maple tree we planted the year after Timmy was born. The kitchen with the squeaky cabinet he never got around to fixing. And for the first time in years, I was afraid of going home, because it didn't feel like home anymore without him in it. At 3:14 a.m. his heart monitor skipped. Just once. But that single blip sent the nurse rushing in. They told me he was stable. But in my bones, I knew something was slipping. Something I couldn't hold on to no matter how tight I gripped his hand. Before the machines, before the whispers in the hallway and the fear that lived in my throat, there was us. Me and Harold. Maggie and Hal. We met in 1971 at Carter's roller rink in upstate New York. I was 18 working part-time at the ticket booth trying to save up for beauty school. He was 22 just back from Vietnam. I noticed him right away. Awkward on skates, tall with shaggy hair and kind eyes. He fell twice that night. I laughed both times. The third time he crashed near my booth and grinned up at me. Guess I needed a soft place to land, he said. And that's how it started. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. With a tiny ring and sweaty palms. We got married in my mother's backyard under the elm tree. No band, no fancy dress, just fried chicken, lemonade, and the sound of people who loved us clapping when we kissed. We bought our home 2 years later. A small white house on Maple Drive. It wasn't much. The pipes groaned in the winter, and the roof leaked that first spring. But it was ours. Every scratch on the floor, every nail in the wall. Harold made sure we earned it together. We raised 3 children there. I rocked babies to sleep in that living room. Harold taught them to ride bikes in the front yard. We hosted Thanksgiving every year, even when the turkey came out dry. That house held more than furniture. It held Sunday morning pancakes and arguments over money. It held birthdays, prayers, apologies, and dreams. It held us. We weren't perfect. God knows we fought. There was a year Harold lost his job at the mill, and nearly lost himself in the bottle too. And there were times I wanted to walk out and never look back. But love isn't just romance. It's choosing someone over and over, even when the world doesn't make it easy. And that's what we did. Every day for 47 years, we chose each other. That Sunday before the heart attack, I remember so clearly now. We danced in the kitchen. I had Frank Sinatra playing on the old radio. I was stirring stew, and he walked in, grabbed my hand, and pulled me close. Still the prettiest girl I've ever seen, he whispered. I rolled my eyes, but my cheeks went red. He kissed my forehead, then went outside to rake leaves. I remember watching him from the window, slow, steady, his back bent with age. I thought, God, I'm lucky. I still have him. And I never imagined that just 24 hours later, I'd be holding his hand in a hospital, praying not to lose him. Sometimes the storm hits before you even realize the clouds have gathered. But that Sunday was sunshine. Pure, quiet sunshine. And I'll hold that memory close, because the darkness that followed was colder than anything I could have imagined. I left the hospital Tuesday evening with a heart heavy from hours of watching Harold sleep like a ghost of himself. The nurses insisted I go home, said I needed rest, a shower, maybe a warm meal. I didn't want to leave his side. But I also didn't want to collapse right there beside him. So I drove home. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the familiar streets of our neighborhood. I turned onto Maple Drive, the tires crunching slow against the gravel. My house, our house, stood just where it always had. But something felt wrong. There was paper flapping on the front door. It caught the light. A yellow rectangle. I parked fast and rushed up the porch steps. That's when I saw it. Notice to vacate 7 days. Issued by the county clerk. Signed by someone I'd never heard of. I blinked hard, my fingers trembling as I read the legal words printed in bold. The property located at 1647, Maple Drive has been foreclosed due to unpaid liens. Current occupant has 1 week to vacate the premises. I couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. We owned this house. Harold paid the mortgage off years ago. I fumbled for my phone and called the number listed on the notice. No answer. Just a robotic voice telling me, "The office is closed." I stood there on the porch, wind in my hair, paper clenched in my hand, feeling like the ground beneath me had been pulled away. I stepped inside, still ours for the moment, and dropped my purse on the floor. The living room looked exactly the same. Harold's recliner facing the TV. Our wedding photo on the mantel. The Afghan I knitted last winter folded neatly on the couch. But now it all felt borrowed. Fragile. Like someone had already decided this life didn't belong to me anymore. I spent that night pacing. I pulled out every drawer, every cabinet, every folder I could find in the filing cabinet.
Nulla papers. No overduno utisis.
No foreclosure letters. Nothing that made sense. But I did find something else. A locked envelope. Hidden in the back of Harold's desk drawer. His handwriting on the front. "Maggie, only if you need to know." I stared at it, heart pounding. But I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. I barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded like someone coming to take it. Every memory that passed through my head only made the knot in my chest tighter. Harold was fighting for his life in a sterile hospital room. And here I was, standing on the edge of losing everything we built. The next morning, I returned to the hospital and kissed his forehead. He was sleeping, mouth slightly open, monitors still chirping their cold rhythm. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake and ask him what he'd done, what he hadn't told me. But I couldn't. I just whispered, "Baby,
I'm scared."
And I held his hand tighter than I ever had before. I sat beside Harold's hospital bed, the soft hiss of the oxygen machine filling the silence. He looked peaceful, like he was just napping. But I knew better. Every hour, the doctors reminded me of his fragility. "He's stable for now," they'd say. But I saw the shadow in their eyes, the kind of shadow that comes right before the end. I held that unopened envelope in my purse, the one with his familiar handwriting. "Only if you need to know." Well, Harold, I needed to know now. That afternoon, I left the hospital just long enough to sit in my car and open it. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Signed. Simple. But the words shattered something in me I didn't even realize was still intact. "Maggie, if you're reading this, then something's gone wrong. And I didn't have the courage to tell you in time. A few years ago, after I lost my pension and took that second mortgage, I didn't keep up with the payments. I thought I'd catch up. I tried. But the debt piled up. Then I got sick and I didn't want to burden you. So I never said a word. The house, it was taken. Quietly. Legally. I thought I had time to fix it before you ever had to know.
I'm sorry, Maggie.
I failed you. I never meant to. You deserved more than this. I love you. Always have. Always will. Harold." I stared at the letter for what felt like hours. Tears blurred the words, but they didn't change them. He lied. Not to be cruel, but to protect me. He had always carried our burdens on his back, thinking he could shield me from the storm. But this time the storm broke through. I drove home and walked through the house like I was seeing it for the last time. The kitchen where I made pot roast every Sunday. The hallway lined with school pictures and crooked frames. The bedroom that still smelled like his aftershave. It all felt hollow now. And the worst part? He promised. He promised this would be our forever home. That no matter what, we'd grow old here. Die here. I remembered that winter evening 10 years ago when I asked him, "What happens to the house if something happens to you?" He laughed and pulled me close. "It'll always be yours, Maggie." I made sure of that. But he hadn't. He tried. I believe he tried. But now I was a widow in waiting, with nowhere to go and no clue how to begin again. And I was angry. God help me, I was angry at the man I loved more than life itself. I screamed into a pillow until my throat went raw. I threw the letter against the wall. I collapsed on the kitchen floor and cried until the linoleum felt like ice against my cheek. Later that night, I sat in his recliner, his favorite one with the frayed armrest and the blanket I crocheted draped over it. I whispered into the empty room, "You broke your promise, Harold, and I don't know how to forgive you for that." And yet, I already had. Wednesday morning came slow. The sky was the kind of gray that presses on your chest. No sunrise, no birdsong. Just heavy clouds like the world already knew what was coming. I walked into the hospital with tired eyes and a heart that felt like glass. When I reached Harold's room, I knew. Before a nurse even looked up. Before anyone said a word. I knew. His skin was too still. His chest no longer lifted. And the monitor silent. The nurse touched my shoulder gently. He passed early this morning. Peacefully. Just before dawn. The words rang in my ears like church bells from a funeral I hadn't planned yet. I nodded. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked over and sat beside him. My Harold. My husband of 47 years. The man who made my coffee just right and kissed my forehead when I got upset. Gone. I reached for his hand, now cool and limp. I ran my fingers over his wedding band. The one I placed there so many years ago when my hands were young and trembling with excitement instead of grief. Hey baby, I whispered. You're free now. No more tubes. No more pain. Just peace. I leaned down and kissed his cheek. It was soft and pale, and I could still smell a hint of his aftershave. I forgive you, I said, my voice cracking. Even if I don't know what comes next, I'll figure it out. Just like you would've. The funeral home called by noon. They needed decisions, coffin, flowers, obituary, music. But how do you plan a goodbye when you never thought it would come so soon? I sat in the hospital parking lot in my car for an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. I didn't want to go home. Not to the house with the eviction notice. Not without him. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to call our kids. 3 adult children scattered across the country. Too busy to call except on birthdays and holidays. When I told them their father had passed, there was silence. Then obligatory tears. Then travel plans. But none of them offered more than words. None of them asked if I was okay. None of them knew I was also about to lose the house. And I didn't tell them. Not yet. It was too much. Too raw. That night I opened the bedroom closet and just stood there. His shirt still hung in their place. His shoes lined up neatly below. The hat he wore every day perched on the top shelf. I pulled down his old navy blue cardigan, the one with the missing button and coffee stain on the cuff, and hugged it like a child clinging to her father. And finally, I broke. The sobs came so hard they shook my ribs. I fell to my knees right there on the hardwood floor, screaming into the silence. Come back to me, Harold. Please. I don't know how to do this without you. But the room didn't answer. Only the house creaked softly in the wind. That was the night I truly understood what it meant to say goodbye. Not with words. Not with funeral flowers. But with the ache that settles in your bones when the person who made the world feel safe is gone. There's something surreal about planning a funeral for the person you thought you'd grow old with. You imagine someday, far in the future, one of you will go first. But never like this. Not in the same week you're being told to pack up your life and get out of your home. The funeral home smelled like wax and flowers, too clean, too artificial. The director, a man in a navy blue suit with too slick hair, walked me through everything like he was reading from a script. Do you have a preferred casket style? Would you like a church service or graveside only? Music choices? Readings? Flowers. I answered each question as if I were filling out a form at the DMV. My voice didn't even sound like my own. Our kids arrived 2 days later. Timothy, the eldest, came in from Chicago with his Bluetooth earpiece still clipped to his ear. Jenna flew in from Dallas with her laptop, still answering emails from the airport. And Ryan, the youngest, drove in from Boston, wearing his grief like an unfamiliar coat. They hugged me at the door, offered sorry mamas, and got straight to business. Tim wanted to skip the open casket. Jenna argued for cremation. Ryan stayed quiet. None of them asked where Harold's will was. None of them asked about the house. I didn't bring it up. Not yet. I wasn't ready to watch the truth break them. The service was held at St. Mark's, the same church where we got married. I wore a navy dress Harold loved. The kids sat in the front pew like strangers. The pastor said kind things. He was a good man, a devoted husband, a quiet strength in this world. People I hadn't seen in years came and hugged me. Old neighbors, church ladies, the butcher from down the street. They all said the same thing. I'm so sorry for your loss. He loved you so much. He was one of the good ones. I nodded, smiled, thanked them. But inside all I could hear was, he's really gone. And I'm still standing here without a home. At the graveside, I held Jenna's hand as the casket was lowered. The wind blew through the cemetery trees, and the sun peeked out just long enough to warm my face. "Goodbye, baby," I whispered. "I'll find my way. Somehow." Then the dirt hit the coffin, and that sound, the dull final thud, made something in me collapse. We went back to the house for a small gathering. Casseroles lined the counter. People filled the rooms, but I felt more alone than I did in the hospital. Everywhere I looked I saw Harold. His chair. His coat on the hook. His slippers still by the back door. I wanted to scream, "He's gone. All of this is gone." But I smiled, made tea, served cake, and kept my secrets tucked behind a trembling smile. That night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen. The house echoed with absence. And when I looked out the window, I noticed the porch light had burned out. Funny how fast things fade when the heart of the home is no longer there. The morning after the funeral, I woke up to silence. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort you. It smothers you. No sound of Harold humming while he brushed his teeth. No smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. Just an empty bed, and a chill that crept all the way to my bones. I sat up slowly, staring at the indentation where he used to sleep. My hand reached out instinctively, but found nothing but cold sheets. I made my way downstairs. The house felt different now. Bigger. Emptier. Almost like it didn't recognize me anymore. Like I was trespassing in a place where love used to live. I stood in the living room and looked around. The couch where we spent lazy Sunday afternoons. The shelf where he proudly displayed his fishing trophies. The fireplace we never quite got to fixing. It had all meant something. Now it felt like a museum of a life that no longer belonged to me. At noon a knock came at the door. I opened it to find a young man in a suit holding a clipboard. "Margaret Davis?" "Yes. I'm here on behalf of Haven County Housing. I'm sorry to disturb you, but this property is officially scheduled for repossession next Monday. I'm required to serve final notice." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "This is my home," I said softly. He didn't even look up. "I understand, ma'am, but the foreclosure process has been finalized. We're giving you a few more days to vacate." He handed me the paper. I didn't even look at it. "Have a good day," he said, already turning back toward his car. I closed the door and pressed my back against it. I felt the panic crawling up my throat like smoke in a burning house. This can't be happening, I thought. Not now. Not here. But it was. And for the first time I realized I wasn't just mourning my husband. I was mourning my home. My kitchen. My garden. My porch swing. Every inch of this house had held part of me. And now it didn't want me anymore. I tried to sit and have some tea. I poured hot water into Harold's favorite mug. The one with the fishing boat and chipped rim. But I couldn't swallow. My chest was too tight. Tears spilled over before I even realized they were coming. I sobbed into the steam, holding that mug like it was the last thing keeping me anchored. Later that night I walked from room to room, touching the walls like they were old friends I had to say goodbye to. In the hallway I paused at the family pictures. There we were, young and laughing. Me in a red dress, Harold in a suit too big for his frame, our kids on our laps. And I whispered to the photos, "I don't know where I'll go. I don't know how to start over. But I'll try, Harold. I'll try for you." I slept in his chair that night, curled up under the quilt I'd made the year our youngest graduated high school. And before I drifted off, I looked around the dim living room and thought, this was once a sanctuary. Now it's just a place I'll be evicted from. And I don't belong in it anymore. I'm just a stranger passing through what used to be my own home. I started packing on a Thursday morning. Not because I was ready, but because I had to. The eviction date circled my thoughts like a vulture. Every creak in the floor, every whisper of wind outside the windows, sounded like a countdown. So I found an old roll of tape in the hall closet, dragged some cardboard boxes out of the garage, and stood in the middle of my living room with no idea where to begin. The first thing I packed was a photo album. It was thick with years, birthdays, Christmases, summer cookouts. Harold holding the kids up on his shoulders. Me with flour on my nose in the kitchen. Photos that smelled like the past. I sat on the carpet for nearly an hour, flipping through the pages, tears wetting my fingertips. It wasn't just pictures. It was proof that we'd lived, that we'd loved. Then came the books. Harold's Louis L'Amour westerns. My battered cookbooks with notes scribbled in the margins. I packed them slowly, running my fingers over the spines like they were old friends I wouldn't see again. I wrapped our wedding china in old newspaper. Each clink felt like a farewell. Then the record player. The same one we used on slow Saturday nights to dance barefoot in the living room. I hesitated, hands on the turntable. Where will I even plug this in again? I wondered. But I packed it anyway. The closets were the hardest. I stood there staring at Harold's clothes. Plaid flannels. Soft cotton tees. His church suit. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. So I folded them, one by one, and laid them gently in a box labeled Harold. It felt wrong. As if I was erasing him, compressing his life into cardboard and Sharpa letters. But I couldn't leave them behind. They still smelled like him. And I needed that. I found old letters in the nightstand drawer. Birthday cards. Anniversary notes. Even one from the day Tim was born. You were so strong, Maggie. I've never loved you more. We made a life today. I held the paper to my chest and wept. Not just for the house, but for all the moments we'd never have again. All the life that once breathed between these walls. By sunset, the living room was full of boxes. Labeled. Stacked. Taped. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a storage unit. Like I was just some moving woman, not a wife, not a mother. Just a ghost packing up the last of her existence. That night, I lit a candle and sat in the middle of the floor. I whispered to the walls, "You held my family. You gave us shelter. I'll never forget you." I didn't know where I was going, but I knew the moment I walked out of that front door, I wouldn't be coming back. And all I could take with me were the memories I'd tucked into cardboard boxes. Each one heavy not from weight but from love. Sunday night came too fast. My last night in the house. I walked through each room barefoot and quiet, like I didn't want to disturb the memories. I touched the doorknobs, the window panes, the wall near the kitchen where we marked the kids' heights in pencil. I whispered goodbye to every inch of the place that had held my life. But no matter how many times I said it, it never felt like enough. By morning I was gone. The U-Haul was too expensive, so I packed what I could fit in the trunk and backseat of my old Dodge. 4 boxes, 2 garbage bags of clothes, Harold's urn, and my pillow. I didn't have a destination. I just drove. That night, as the sky dimmed over the edge of a grocery store parking lot, I parked behind the far dumpster where the lights didn't shine too bright. I pulled a blanket over myself and leaned the seat back. The silence was loud, and cold, and lonely. I clutched Harold's cardigan in one hand and the framed photo of us in the other. It was our 40th anniversary picture. Him in a blue tie, me with silver hair pinned up and a grin I barely recognized anymore. I rested the frame on the dashboard and stared at it. We had a home, I whispered. We had everything. I cried quietly. Not loud sobs. Just the kind of weeping that shakes your chest and makes your eyes sting. There's something about sleeping in your car at 70 years old that humbles you more than words can say. Not because of the cold. Not because of the hard seat. But because you realize how invisible you've become. The next morning I woke to tapping on my window. A grocery store employee in an apron, holding a broom. "You can't sleep here, ma'am." I nodded. "I'll go." I didn't argue. Didn't try to explain. There's a kind of shame that doesn't need explanation. You just carry it quietly like a scar beneath your coat. I drove aimlessly for a few hours. Through quiet neighborhoods with flower boxes and wind chimes. Past drive-thrus I couldn't afford. Past benches I was afraid to lie on. Then I parked at a rest stop and sat with the engine off. I looked at Harold's photo again. Tired. Hollow-eyed. Heartbroken. "I'm trying, baby," I whispered. "But I don't know how much more I've got left." And in that moment I realized, I wasn't just grieving a man. I was grieving a life. A home. A version of myself that no longer existed. By the third night in my car I could feel it in my bones. The stiffness in my knees. The ache in my back. The kind of pain that doesn't just come from sleeping upright. It comes from hopelessness settling in your limbs like lead. I hadn't eaten more than crackers and an apple in 2 days. My mouth was dry. My clothes smelled like the inside of a suitcase. I couldn't stop hearing Harold's voice in my head. You okay, Mags? No, I wasn't. That morning I parked outside a little church with a free meal sign nailed to the front steps. I didn't care what kind of meal it was. I just needed warmth. A bathroom. A moment to feel like a person again. Inside, it smelled of tomato soup and mop water. A few folding tables were set up, and volunteers with kind eyes passed out bowls and bread. I sat in the corner. No one looked twice at me, just another old woman down on her luck. A middle-aged woman with gentle hands brought me a tray. Hi there, she said softly.
I'm Gloria.
You're safe here. The words cracked something inside me. I hadn't felt safe in weeks. I hadn't heard my name spoken with kindness since Harold left this world. After the meal, she sat across from me. You from around here? Used to be, I said. Then I told her. Not everything. Just enough. She nodded, listening. Not pitying me. Just seeing me. We have a women's shelter up the street, she said. It's small but clean. Warm beds. Staff that care. You don't have to sleep in your car again tonight. I hesitated. I wasn't proud of needing help. But I was tired. And so cold. The shelter was a plain brick building with iron railings and a cracked sidewalk. Inside, it smelled like Lysol and laundry detergent. There were a dozen beds in one room, separated by curtains. Most of the women were younger, mothers with children, women with haunted eyes, women who didn't ask questions. The staff gave me a blanket, a clean towel, and a cot by the wall. They smiled like they meant it. And for the first time in days, I took a hot shower. I wept under the water. Not because I was weak, but because I was starting to feel again. That night, I laid on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, Harold's cardigan clutched against my chest. I made it through another day, I whispered. And you were with me. I know you were. And for the first time since I lost everything, I slept. Not because I was safe, not because things were better, but because I finally stopped pretending I could do it alone. The next morning, I woke to the sound of quiet footsteps and soft whispers. The shelter stirred gently. Women rising early, brushing their children's hair, folding blankets like they still had control over something. I sat up slowly, my back sore, my neck stiff. But I was alive. And I had a roof over my head. For now. After breakfast, a warm biscuit and watery coffee, I sat in the common room by the window, watching the traffic crawl by. I looked down at my hands. Wrinkled. Veined. A little shaky. These hands had raised 3 children. These hands had baked 1,000 pies, stitched holes in pants, scrubbed floors until they shined. But were they good for anything anymore? Gloria, the same kind woman from the church, stopped by the shelter that afternoon. You feeling any better? She asked gently. I nodded, still figuring things out. Well, she said, digging into her tote bag. I brought something that might help. She handed me a flyer. Part-time work for seniors, it read. Companionship, light housekeeping, front desk assistance. Flexible hours. No experience required. I stared at the paper. Me? At 70? I hadn't worked in over 20 years. Not since Harold retired and we started spending our afternoons at the park, holding hands like teenagers. But this was a different life now. And pride doesn't pay for soup. The next morning I found my way to the address on the flyer. A senior resource center near the library. Small, beige building with a peeling sign that read Grace and Hope Community Outreach. I stepped inside. The walls were lined with bulletin boards, warm faces, and the scent of lemon-scented cleaner. The receptionist, a woman with bright red glasses and a kind smile, looked up. Hi there. Looking for volunteer work? I hesitated. Looking for anything. I need a fresh start. She tilted her head. Well, we could use someone at the front desk for a few hours a day. Answering phones, greeting visitors. Think you'd be up for it? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yes, I think I would. That afternoon, I filled out a form with shaking hands. Under previous employment, I wrote, homemaker, mother, wife, 47 years. The woman looked over my shoulder and smiled. Those are the most important jobs of all. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I still had value. Like I still had something left to give. I walked out with the start date Monday. 3 hours a day. $9 an hour. It wasn't much. But it was dignity. It was something to wake up for. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching that little paper schedule like it was a golden ticket. I did it, Harold. I whispered to the wind. I'm not giving up. The job at the community center gave me rhythm routine. Every morning I combed my thinning hair, dabbed a little rose powder on my cheeks, and walked 2 blocks to the front desk. I answered phones, greeted guests, refilled candy jars. Simple things. But they made me feel human again. I still slept at the shelter. Still carried Harold's photo everywhere I went. Still whispered goodnight to him each evening like he was beside me. And slowly, very slowly, the ache in my chest softened into something bearable. One chilly Thursday afternoon, I was organizing pamphlets by the coffee machine when the front door opened. I didn't look up at first, but then I heard a voice. Soft.
Familiar.
A little shaky. Mom. I turned, and there she was. Jenna. My daughter. She looked thinner. Tired. Her hair pulled into a tight bun. Her heels clacking against the tile. Behind her sunglasses I saw red eyes. Jenna. I blinked, breath catching in my throat. She stepped closer. Why didn't you tell me, Mom? I stared at her, heart racing. How did you? She pulled something from her purse. A folded eviction notice. The same yellow one I found taped to my door weeks ago. Ryan found it, she said. In a pile of Dad's old papers. He called me. We've been trying to reach you. My throat tightened. I didn't want to be a burden. Jenna blinked. A burden? Mom, you're our mother. You lost Dad. Your house. Everything. And we weren't there. Tears welled in her eyes.
I'm sorry.
I sat down on the chair behind the desk. She sat across from me like she was 5 years old again and needed my comfort. I didn't know how to tell you, I whispered. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want anyone to pity me. You didn't need pity, she said. You needed help. And we should have seen it. I reached across and held her hand. We both cried. Quietly. Together. For the first time since Harold's funeral, I felt like family again. That night, Jenna took me to a diner. We shared a turkey sandwich and warm pie. She told me about her divorce, the one she hadn't told anyone about. She told me she cried when she heard I was sleeping in my car. She told me she wanted to fix things. And I realized she was broken too. And somehow our pieces fit together. Before she dropped me off at the shelter, she said, "Come stay with me, please, just until we figure things out." I looked at the building, then back at her. I've got a job now, I said proudly. I'm starting over. But maybe just for a little while. She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. Moving in with Jenna wasn't easy at first. Her condo was modern, sleek. So different from my warm old house with its crooked floorboards and faded wallpaper. There were no wind chimes on the porch. No creaky steps. Just polished granite countertops and silence that hummed like electricity. But there was space. And kindness. And a real bed with clean sheets and a soft comforter. She gave me the guest room. Hung up new curtains. Set out fresh towels like I was a visitor from some foreign land. I wasn't used to being cared for. Not like that. But maybe it was time I learned. Each morning, I still walked to the community center. Only now, I left from Jenna's front door, with a packed lunch she'd made the night before. A tuna sandwich. An apple. Little notes tucked inside. Love you, Mom. She didn't say it out loud, not yet. But she wrote it. That was enough. At work, the women at the front desk began to smile when they saw me. You're glowing, one of them said. I laughed. It's the sandwich. But it wasn't. It was something deeper. A little crack of light beginning to shine through the grief. One afternoon, after I helped organize a coat drive, Gloria pulled me aside. You've got fire in you, Maggie, she said. You ever think about leading one of our support groups? For women starting over. I blinked. Me? I barely made it through the storm. She smiled. Exactly. That's why they'll listen. That night, Jenna and I sat on the couch watching old movies. Roman holiday and steel magnolias. Halfway through, she leaned against me and said, "Do you think Dad would be proud of us?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about everything. The pain. The boxes. The tears. The nights in the car. And the mornings after, when I still found a reason to get up. "I think," I said slowly, "he never stopped being proud." She wiped a tear from her cheek and nodded. "Me too." That weekend, we visited the cemetery together. Jenna brought flowers. I brought the letter Harold left me, folded and worn, but still whole. We stood side by side in the spring air, watching the breeze dance through the grass. "I miss you every single day," I whispered. "But I'm standing. I'm breathing. And I'm finally finding my way." As we walked back to the car, Jenna took my hand. We didn't say much. We didn't have to, because in that moment, with sun on my face, my daughter by my side, and a full heart in my chest, I knew something for certain. I was still here, and I was finally finding light again. I never saw myself as a leader. I was always the quiet one, the steady one, the wife who kept the household running, the mother who held everything together. But the idea of leading a support group, that felt foreign, even foolish. But Gloria kept nudging. "They need someone real," she said. "Not perfect, just honest." So one Tuesday afternoon, I stood in the back room of the Grace and Hope Community Center. 6 women sat in a circle, all of them different, young, older, black, white, mothers, daughters, bruised, broken, rebuilding. I clutched Harold's old sweater in my hands like armor. "I'm Maggie," I said quietly. "And a year ago, I had everything I thought I needed. A husband, a home, a sense of who I was." The room was quiet.
No judgment.
Just listening. And then, I lost it all. My husband passed. My home was taken. I slept in my car. I ate crackers for dinner. But I survived. I looked up at them, steady now. And that's what we're going to do. Together. Each woman took turns sharing their story. Vanessa, a mother of 2, had fled her abusive husband in the middle of the night with nothing but diapers and fear. Dolores, 62, had lost her pension and spent months living on park benches before a stranger brought her to the center. Maria hadn't spoken to her family in 10 years. And when her job laid her off, she lost everything overnight. They all had different pain, but the same longing, for dignity, for peace, for a second chance. Week after week we met. Sometimes we cried. Sometimes we laughed so hard we had to hold our stomachs. Sometimes we sat in silence, because even silence can be healing when it's shared. I taught them how to fill out job forms, how to apply for senior housing, how to walk into a thrift store with their heads held high. And they taught me something too. That survival isn't shameful. That rebuilding isn't weakness. That love doesn't die when someone's gone. It just changes shape. One day Vanessa said, "You're like the mother some of us never had, Maggie." I smiled. I'm just a grandma with a lot of mistakes and a few stories. But deep down I felt something shift. Purpose. That old ache in my chest? It was still there, but now it lived beside something else. Something softer. Hope. That evening Jenna picked me up from the center. "How'd it go?" she asked. I looked out the window as we passed the park, the benches, the street corners I once sat on alone. "It went beautifully," I said. "I think I found my voice. Because the truth is, I lost my husband. I lost my home. But in the rubble, I found me. And I wasn't done yet." Spring rolled in slow but steady. The air smelled sweeter. The sky was clearer. Even the pigeons downtown seemed to coo with a bit more joy. And something inside me had shifted too. Not just grief turning to memory. Not just pain softening at the edges. But something deeper. Like life was nudging me toward possibility. At the community center, word had spread about our little support group. More women showed up each week. The staff asked if I'd consider turning it into a regular program. "I'm not a therapist," I said. Gloria smiled. "You're better. You're one of them." I started writing things down. Quotes I'd lived by, lessons Harold taught me. Little phrases that helped me climb out of dark places. We made handouts. Printed flyers. Called it Still Standing. A circle for women rebuilding their lives. I stood in front of that group every Tuesday like it was church. And they came. Broken, brave, tired, resilient. We were building something that couldn't be measured in dollars or bricks. We were building each other. Meanwhile, back at Jenna's condo, our relationship had deepened. She opened up about her failed marriage, the loneliness that followed, the guilt she carried about not being there for me sooner. And I let her in. Not just into my day-to-day but into my soul. She started coming to the group meetings. Sometimes quietly observing. Sometimes sharing. And one day, she said something I'll never forget. My mother used to feel like a memory. But now she feels like my hero. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old things from the shelter, I found my wedding ring. I had taken it off the day I packed the house, thinking I didn't deserve to wear it anymore. I slipped it back onto my finger, not because I was holding on to the past, but because I was honoring the love that got me here. The kind of love that didn't die, it just evolved. That evening, Jenna walked in with 2 mugs of tea and a curious smile. "What's that look for?" I asked. She sat beside me on the couch. "I've been thinking," she said. "There's a little house on Maple Street. Just came on the market. Tiny. Old. Needs work. But it's charming. Has a porch swing and everything." She paused. "I think it's meant for you." I blinked. "For me?" She nodded. "I'll help with the down payment. You've earned it. You're not a guest, Mom. You deserve your own home again." I don't remember crying. I just remember reaching out and taking her hand. "Are you sure?" I've never been more sure. And in that moment, after losing so much, after scraping my knees on rock bottom, a spark lit inside me. A spark of something new. The first time I saw the little house on Maple Street, I didn't say a word. I just stood there on the sidewalk, hand on my heart, eyes wide, taking it all in. It wasn't fancy. The paint was chipped. The fence leaned. The porch steps creaked when I climbed them. But to me it was beautiful. Because it was mine. Not Harold's. Not the bank's. Not a daughter's spare room. It was the first thing in months that felt like it belonged to me. Jenna handed me the keys that day like she was giving me a gift wrapped in grace. "Welcome home, Mom," she whispered. I didn't open the door right away. I just held the key in my hand, staring down at the way it glinted in the sunlight. It had weight. Like everything I'd survived. Like everything I'd reclaimed. And when I finally turned the lock and stepped inside, I swear I could feel Harold's spirit walk in with me. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with yellowed linoleum and a window over the sink. The living room was dusty and empty, but I could already see it. The chair by the window. The quilt on the couch. The photo of Harold above the mantel. It was a blank canvas. And for once I was the artist. The community center helped me furnish it. Gently used items. Donated things. A few kind neighbors who brought over a crock pot and a lamp. Jenna helped paint the kitchen walls a soft, sunny cream. We laughed as we splashed paint on our shoes and argued over curtain patterns. And every night, as I swept or unpacked or just sat with tea in my hands, I whispered, "Thank you, God. Thank you for bringing me home." One evening, I opened the box labeled Harold. Inside, his fishing hat. His wallet. The blue cardigan. A letter I wrote him but never mailed. I placed the cardigan on the back of a rocking chair by the window. Hung his photo above it. It didn't make me sad. It made me feel complete. Like he wasn't gone. Just watching from the other side of the porch. And when I hosted my first small group in my new living room, just 4 women, mismatched chairs, instant coffee and store-bought cookies, I knew I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Because after all the darkness, all the nights in the car, all the cold beds and whispered prayers, I finally had a light on my porch. A warm kitchen. A set of keys that opened a door I could call my own. It started with a song on the radio. A Saturday morning in my little kitchen. Sunlight pouring through the window. The scent of cinnamon oatmeal rising from the stove. I had the radio playing low while I sorted through a pile of old cookbooks from the shelter donation table. And then it came on. Our song. Unchained melody. That familiar, aching voice drifting over the speakers like a memory wrapped in silk. I froze. Spoon in hand. Heart suddenly thudding in my chest. I hadn't heard it in so long. Not since the night Harold and I slow danced in the living room on our 50th wedding anniversary. Barefoot. Laughing. His arms wrapped around me like I was still the girl he met at the diner in 1969. That night he whispered, "I'll love you even when we're ghosts, Mags." I closed my eyes. And suddenly, I wasn't 70. I wasn't alone. I wasn't tired. I was young again. Alive. Without thinking, I placed the spoon down, stepped into the center of the kitchen, and held my hands out as if he were standing right in front of me. And I danced. Slowly. Softly. Just like we used to. I spun in my kitchen with my eyes closed, tears on my cheeks, smiling through the ache. The linoleum beneath my bare feet. The breeze through the open window. The scent of cinnamon and sunlight and memory. To someone passing by, it might have looked like nothing, just an old woman swaying alone. But to me it was everything. Because in that moment, I wasn't grieving. I wasn't surviving. I wasn't rebuilding. I was remembering and rejoicing. I danced through the whole song. All 3 minutes and 39 seconds. When it ended, I sank into the kitchen chair, breathless, laughing through my tears. And I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "You still lead, Harold. Even when I dance alone." Later that day, I told Jenna. She smiled so wide her eyes crinkled. I wish I'd seen it. "You will," I said. "There will be more dances. I promise. Because losing someone doesn't mean you stop dancing. It just means you learn to move with the invisible. And sometimes, on a bright spring morning in a little yellow kitchen, you find yourself dancing not out of sorrow, but out of joy." The day I opened the old cedar chest from our attic storage, I wasn't expecting to find anything special. I was just cleaning, organizing, making space. But tucked beneath a faded quilt and some Christmas ornaments, I found a shoebox tied with twine. It smelled like thyme, dusty sweet, a little like dried lavender. I sat on the floor, untied the knot, and lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of letters. All of them from Harold. They weren't addressed to me. Not directly. They were notes scribbled on the backs of receipts, notepads, even church bulletins. Some dated from the early 70s. Some written just a few years before he passed. They weren't grand declarations. No dramatic poetry or flowery words. Just simple moments captured in ink. "Mags laughed so hard tonight," she cried. "God, I love that laugh. I worry about her when I'm late from work. I know she pretends she doesn't wait by the window, but I see her silhouette. She lost her mother today. Held it together for the kids. But I saw her cry in the laundry room when she thought I wasn't looking." Each note was like a whisper from the past. His private reflections. His way of remembering me, loving me quietly when he didn't know how to say it aloud. I sat there surrounded by yellowed paper, tears streaming down my cheeks. All those years I thought I was the strong one. All those days I wondered if he truly saw me, understood me. And yet here was the proof. He had been watching me, loving me, honoring me in his own silent way the whole time. At the very bottom of the box I found the final letter. This one was sealed. The envelope read simply, "For Maggie, if I go first." My breath caught in my throat. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside, in his neat, blocky handwriting, were these words. "Maggie, if you're reading this, it means I'm not beside you anymore. But that doesn't mean I've left you. You were my greatest gift. My home, my peace, my partner. I wish I could have stayed longer, laughed louder, danced more with you. But if you're sitting there right now wondering what comes next, let me remind you. You're stronger than you think. You've always been. Don't let this world dull your shine. Keep giving. Keep loving. And don't you dare stop dancing. I'll see you in every sunrise, in every warm breeze, in every laugh that escapes you when you least expect it. You were, and always will be, my forever. Love you always, Harold." I held the letter to my heart, rocked gently on the hardwood floor, and whispered, "You didn't just leave me with memories, Harold. You left me with direction." That evening I sat at my writing desk, the one Jenna gave me for the guest room, and wrote my own first letter. To Harold. To the future. To every woman like me who would one day need to feel seen. Because love doesn't end at death. Sometimes it just waits to be read. Autumn came quickly that year. The trees on Maple Street turned to gold and rust, and the air began to carry that crisp promise of change. The little house was quiet, warm, lived in now. The couch had its first real stain. The porch swing squeaked in rhythm with the wind. There were picture frames on every shelf, Harold, the kids, even some of the women from the support group, arm in arm after one of our meetings. Life somehow had settled again. Not in the way it was, but in a way that felt whole even with the cracks. One Sunday morning, Jenna came by with coffee and a surprise in her eyes. She stood in the kitchen doorway, hands behind her back. "Don't get nervous," she said. "I know how you hate surprises." I laughed, wiping biscuit crumbs from my fingers. "What is it?" She pulled out a small gift box and placed it in front of me. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny silver heart in the center. Engraved on the heart were the words, "Still standing." I gasped. Tears filled my eyes before I could speak. "It's from all the women in your group," Jenna said softly. "They pitched in. Said it was time you were honored too." I clutched it to my chest. I couldn't even speak. That same week, the community center asked if they could feature my story in their annual newsletter. "A story of resilience," the director said. "Of survival and hope." They took my photo in front of the porch swing. Harold's cardigan draped over the back like he was just inside waiting for me. They asked what I would say to other women going through what I did. I paused a long time. Then I said, "You're not broken. You're not forgotten. And no matter how heavy it feels right now, you will stand again." By Thanksgiving, Jenna and I had started a tradition. Dinner at my place. She brought the turkey. I made sweet potatoes and pies from scratch. We lit candles for those who weren't at the table, especially Harold. And after dessert we danced. Right there in my tiny living room, barefoot, with music from the old record player. And I laughed. I actually laughed from the belly, the kind that feels like flying. That night, as I curled into bed, the moonlight soft on my windowsill, I whispered into the dark, "You were right, Harold. I'm still here. I'm still dancing. And I'm still standing." It was early January when the knock came. I was sipping tea by the window, watching the rain tap lightly on the glass. The wind had a bite, the kind that crept into your bones. The house was quiet, just how I liked it, but not lonely anymore. Never lonely. Then came the knock. Soft. Hesitant. I opened the door and saw a girl young, no more than 22. Soaked to the skin. Thin as a shadow. Eyes wide with something between fear and exhaustion. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She hesitated. Then offered a crumpled paper flyer, the one about the support group. I don't know where else to go." I stepped aside. "Then come inside. You found the right place." Her name was Brianna. She had no parents. No home. She'd just left a man twice her age who'd kept her locked away from the world. She said she heard about the group from a woman at the bus station who talked about a grandma with a kind smile and a porch light that never goes out. That made me laugh. I hadn't realized how far the story had traveled. But Brianna wasn't just another woman in need. She was me 40 years ago. Raw. Lost. But still flickering with a will to live. I made her tea. Wrapped her in a dry blanket. Fed her the last slice of pie in the fridge. She cried in my kitchen. The way I once had. And I didn't give her advice. I just sat beside her, hand over hers, and said, "You don't have to be okay yet. You just have to stay." The next day, I took her to the community center. Signed her up for housing assistance. Introduced her to the group. First she didn't talk much. Just sat and listened. But one Tuesday afternoon she finally said, "I used to think I was trash. But then Maggie told me something. That broken doesn't mean worthless." Jenna started calling her little sister. She'd drive her to interviews, slip her $20 bills when she thought I wasn't looking. We became a family again, not just of blood but of choice. And one evening, Brianna said something that shook me. "If you hadn't opened that door, I don't think I'd be here right now. But you didn't just let me in. You taught me to open my own." Here is the continuation of your story. Spring came again, softer this time. The trees bloomed earlier, and the wind had a gentler hum, like the world itself was sighing in peace. And on Maple Street, in a little yellow house with chipping paint and a crooked mailbox, life was blossoming too. The porch swing had new cushions. The flower boxes Jenna built overflowed with color. And the porch light, my porch light, never turned off. We started calling it Maggie's house. Not officially, just in whispers, in gratitude, in memory. A place women could come to rest, to weep, to eat, to remember who they were before the world tried to convince them they were nothing. Sometimes it was Brianna bringing someone. Sometimes it was someone from the church or the community center. Sometimes they just showed up, like they'd followed some invisible thread of hope leading to my door. One afternoon, Gloria visited with a binder in her hand and a grin too big to ignore. "We want to turn the group into a non-profit," she said. "A real organization. With funding, outreach, workshops." I blinked. "Me? Run something like that?" She laughed. "You already do. We just want to give it a name and a little grant money." She opened the binder. On the cover, "Still Standing Foundation, founded by Margaret Jennings." My throat tightened. Harold would have been so proud. Brianna found work at the local library. Jenna was dating again. Slowly, cautiously, but with a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was a girl. The support group was now 3 groups. And every Tuesday, that little living room filled with folding chairs, tear-streaked cheeks, belly laughs, and the sound of healing. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of pink and orange, I stepped onto the porch with a cup of tea. The light overhead flickered gently. Brianna came outside and sat beside me on the swing. "You ever think about turning it off?" she asked. "What? The porch light?" She nodded. I smiled, sipping slowly. "No. Not once." She looked at me, eyes gleaming. "Why?" I turned toward her and said, "Because someone out there might still be looking for a place to land. And I want them to know they're not alone." That night, I placed Harold's photo on the windowsill beside the front door. So he could watch too. So he could see what his love built. So he could feel how, even in absence, he helped create a legacy that would carry beyond grief, beyond pain, into purpose. It was a Tuesday like any other. Group had just ended, and the last of the women were leaving, smiling, hugging, promising to bring muffins next week. I stood in the doorway, waving goodbye, the porch light already glowing behind me, and then I saw him, standing across the street. He was older now, like me, thinner, grayer, wearing a worn ball cap I recognized even from the distance of decades. It was Thomas, my brother. The last time I saw him was at Harold's funeral, where he showed up late, said nothing, and left before the pastor had even closed the prayer. He hadn't called, hadn't written, not even after I lost the house. He crossed the street slowly, cautiously, like someone approaching sacred ground. I didn't move, didn't wave. When he reached the bottom step, he took off his cap and looked up at me with eyes full of history. "Hey, Maggie." I crossed my arms. "Tom." There was a long pause, long enough for the porch light to flicker. "I heard about the group," he said finally. "I heard about everything." I didn't answer. I just waited. He stepped one foot onto the first step. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said, "for disappearing, for not helping, for not being the brother you deserved." The words hung in the air. They didn't erase the years. They didn't undo the silence. But they did something unexpected. They softened the cement I had poured around my anger. I stepped aside just a little. "You want tea?" I asked. His shoulders fell with relief. "I'd love some." We sat in the kitchen just like old times, minus the shouting, the resentment, the things we never said. He told me about his regrets. How he thought I was stronger than I really was. How he hated himself for leaving me to face it all alone. I told him about the car, the shelter, the fear, the women, the way Harold's love pulled me through even in death. And somewhere in that long conversation, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I had room in my heart for forgiveness. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and looked around. "You really made something here," he said. I nodded. "I had to." He smiled. "You always were the best of us." I watched him walk back to his truck and drive off under the streetlights, back into whatever life he'd built. But this time I didn't feel bitter. I just felt lighter. Sometimes the past doesn't come back to hurt us. Sometimes it comes back to say it's sorry. And sometimes we're ready to listen. It was a crisp November morning when I first saw her. She stood just beyond the gate, staring at the house like it was a memory she'd misplaced. She wore a red scarf knotted neatly at her throat, and clutched a small leather bag like it held her last ounce of courage. She didn't knock. She just stood there. I stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you, honey?" I asked gently. She flinched like my voice startled her, then nodded slowly. I think so. Are you Maggie Jennings?" I nodded. "I am." She let out a breath. "Then this is the place." Her name was Ruth Ann, and she was older than most of the women who came to the group. Closer to my age, maybe even a few years above. But her posture, that told the story. She walked like someone carrying a weight no one could see. She smiled like it was something she hadn't done in years. I brought her inside, made her tea chamomile with a splash of honey, and waited. "I was married for 41 years, she said softly. "Everyone thought we were perfect. But behind closed doors he was cruel." She looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "I didn't leave. Not until last month. Not until the bruises turned purple, and the silence started to feel like death." I reached across the table and took her hand. No words, just warmth. She cried without making a sound. Tears slipping down her cheeks like they had a path they'd followed before. "I thought no one would take me seriously," she whispered. "I'm old. Who starts over at 75? I squeezed her hand. "Me," I said. "I did. And I'm still standing." Ruth Ann joined our Tuesday group. First she just listened. Then one day she wore bright lipstick. The next she brought pumpkin bread. And by the third week she laughed loud and unashamed at one of Brianna's jokes. That laugh? It was like hearing a bell ring for the first time in decades. A month later, she gave me her red scarf. "Because you reminded me who I was," she said. "And I want you to have it. To keep reminding others." I hung it beside the front door, where every woman who entered could see it. It became a symbol. A flag. A quiet promise that no matter how late it feels, it's never too late to come back to life. It came in a plain white envelope with a return address from the state's Women and Families Initiative. I almost threw it away, thinking it was another newsletter or form letter. But inside was a letter on crisp, official stationery, addressed directly to me. "Dear Ms. Margaret Jennings, we are honored to inform you that the Still Standing Foundation has been selected to receive a state renewal grant in the amount of $50,000. Your organization was chosen based on its extraordinary community impact, resilience-based programming, and the transformative work you've led with women across all ages and backgrounds. We believe in your mission, and we believe in you. Congratulations. Keep shining your light." I read the letter twice, then a third time. Then I set it down, pressed my hands to my face, and let myself weep. It wasn't just the money. It was what the money meant. Recognition. Validation. A chance to do more. Reach farther. Help better. All the nights I slept in a car. All the times I had no one. All the Tuesdays spent holding trembling hands and telling broken women they were not broken forever. It all led to this. Jenna showed up an hour later with groceries and nearly dropped the milk when I told her. "Mom, that's incredible. What are you going to do with it?" I smiled, heart racing. "I'm going to expand. Get a bigger space. More beds. An emergency hotline. Maybe even hire Brianna full-time." Jenna hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might break. "You're changing lives," she whispered. "And I hope you finally realize how much you've changed mine." We held a celebration dinner that weekend. I invited every woman who'd ever sat on my couch and cried. They came with dishes, with flowers, with stories of how far they'd come. Dolores was opening a bakery. Vanessa had her first apartment with her kids. Brianna had just been promoted at the library. We lit candles for the ones who couldn't be there. We sang. We prayed. We remembered. And before the night ended, I stood up and read a quote from one of Harold's old letters. "When you feel small, remember this. A lighthouse doesn't chase ships. It just stands tall, shines bright, and waits. And those in darkness will find it." That night, as I turned off the porch light, I looked out at the street and whispered to the stars, "Thank you for not letting me go. Thank you for every crack that let this light shine through." Word spread faster than I ever imagined. After the grant came through, the Still Standing Foundation was featured in a local news article titled, "From Grief to Grace: How One Grandma's Broken Heart Built a Home for the Forgotten." They printed my photo, me in my garden apron, standing beneath the red scarf Ruth and gave me, with my porch light glowing behind me like a beacon. A few days later, letters started arriving. Emails too. From women across the state and even out of it. Some said, "Your story helped me leave an abusive marriage after 30 years. I thought I was the only one who started over at 60. You gave me hope. I didn't think I deserved that." I kept every letter in a drawer by my bedside. Not because I needed praise, but because they were proof that the suffering I endured hadn't been in vain. That pain, when shared with purpose, could become healing in someone else's hands. We rented a new space. A modest 2-story brick building just a few blocks from my house. The women painted the walls themselves, bright yellows, sky blues, deep purples. We opened a walk-in pantry, a crisis room with 2 beds and a rocking chair. We added a library, free Wi-Fi, and shelves full of donated clothes, sorted by the women for the women. Above the front desk, I hung a wooden sign. "This is not the end of your story." And below that, in smaller letters, "Still standing." Brianna became our operations manager. She walked through that office like it was holy ground. Because to her, and to many it was. Jenna designed the website. Even Thomas, my brother, started dropping by to mow the lawn and fix broken locks. It was strange, but good. Redemption has its own quiet rhythm. One afternoon, a college professor invited me to speak at her women's studies class. I stood in front of a room full of girls with notebooks and wide eyes. "I lost my husband and my home in the same week," I told them. "But it took losing everything to finally find myself." They cried. They clapped. And when one student asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I smiled and said, "Not a moment, because all of it brought me here. And here is beautiful." Now each evening when I walk past the new building and see the porch light glowing there, just like the one on my own home, I pause. And I whisper, "This is my legacy, Harold. Not just survival, but light." It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. I had just finished planting marigolds in the front garden, Harold's favorite. The house smelled of earth, lavender oil, and something warm baking in the oven. The air was still, the kind of peaceful that wraps around you like a favorite quilt. Then I remembered the small wooden box tucked beneath my bed, the one where I kept the letters. Harold's letters. My letters. And the ones from the women who had passed through my door and left their hearts behind. I hadn't opened it in a while. Not because I'd forgotten, but because some memories ask to rest until you're ready again. I took the box to the kitchen table, poured myself some chamomile tea, lit a candle like I always did when I wanted to feel close to him. And there on top of the stack was a sealed envelope. My handwriting. My seal. "To Harold, when I'm ready." I don't remember writing it, not exactly. Maybe it was in those early days. Maybe it was just before I danced again in our kitchen. But I opened it, and the words spilled out like a sigh I had been holding in for years. "My love, you were the first home I ever knew. The safe place in a world that didn't always make sense. And when you left, I thought I was done. I didn't know how to breathe without you beside me. But I kept going, Harold. I kept walking. I held on to your memory like a lantern in a storm. And when I reached the edge of grief, I found women there who needed me just like I once needed you. You gave me strength when I had none. And now through them I've learned that love doesn't end, it multiplies. You would love them, Harold. You would be proud. You always said I had more to give. I finally believe you. I'll keep the light on for a little while longer. But when my time comes, just meet me with your arms open. We have more dances to finish. Forever yours, Maggie. When I finished reading, the tears came softly. Not like waves. Like rain after a long drought. And they weren't sad tears. They were full. Grateful. Peaceful. That evening I walked out onto the porch. Held the letter close to my chest. The sky was painted in gold and violet. The street quiet. The light on. And in that stillness I felt him like a warm wind brushing my cheek. Not gone. Just waiting. The final letter wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. That love endures. That healing continues. That legacies grow even in broken soil. Time moved on as it always does. The marigolds bloomed every spring like clockwork. The porch swing swayed with the rhythm of wind and memory. And the still-standing foundation became more than I ever imagined. It became a movement, a lifeline, a living legacy. One April morning I walked into the new center and found Brianna sitting in the office, tears in her eyes and a letter in her hand. She looked up at me, smiling. "I've been accepted," she whispered. "Full scholarship. Women's Leadership Fellowship at Howard University." My heart swelled. I hugged her like she was my own daughter. "You were always meant to lead," I said. She laughed through tears. "I learned it from you." We threw her a goodbye dinner, potluck style, just like the old days. Ruth baked 3 pies. Jenna gave a toast that made everyone cry. And Brianna stood up at the end, voice shaking, heart wide open. "I came here with nothing but fear." Maggie opened her door, and in doing that, she gave me a future. This place isn't just a shelter. It's where women remember who they are. So no matter where I go, or what title I earn, just know this. I will always be part of the light that started on Maggie's porch. After she left, the center didn't dim. It grew. New faces stepped in to lead. Younger women. Fierce women. Gentle women with stories just as heavy and hearts just as brave. They called themselves the Second Lights. Carriers of the fire. They painted murals on the building's side wall. One of them was of me, holding a lantern, surrounded by glowing silhouettes of the women I'd walked alongside. I never felt so humbled in my life. Jenna surprised me one day with a new plaque for the entryway. Founded by Margaret Jennings, the heart that never quit. I chuckled when I saw it. "I'm not sure I deserve all that." Jenna leaned in and kissed my cheek. "You don't get to decide that, Mom. We do." Now when I sit on my porch, wrapped in Harold's old cardigan, sipping tea and watching the sun go down, I think about that first night I lost everything. The silence, the fear, the utter aloneness. And I smile. Because now that silence has become song, that fear has become courage, and that loneliness has become a family. Sometimes a woman breaks. But if she's lucky, she gets to rebuild. And if she's really lucky, she gets to light the way for someone else. I lost my husband and my home in the same week. But I gained something deeper. Purpose. A calling. A reason to keep the porch light on. It had been years since I danced. Not because I couldn't. My joints still had a little fire in them, thanks to daily stretching and a stubborn heart. But because I hadn't needed to. Not like that day in the kitchen with Unchained Melody, playing through the radio. Not like the days when I danced with Harold under the ceiling fan and called it our ballroom. But that night, under fairy lights strung across the center's courtyard for our 10-year anniversary, I felt it again. The pull. The music in my bones. The memory rising in my chest like a song I hadn't heard in years. They'd organized everything without me knowing. Jenna. Brianna, who flew back just for the event. Even Ruth now walking with a cane but smiling like a girl in her first dress. The place was glowing. Candles on every table, laughter echoing across the garden. Framed photos of all the women we'd walked beside. One table displayed a framed copy of the original flyer for the support group. Another, a picture of Harold and me on our 25th anniversary laughing barefoot in the backyard. And in the center of it all, the women took turns on the mic. She gave me a room when I had no roof. She called me by my name when I forgot who I was. She believed in me before I ever believed in myself. Each word made my eyes blur with tears. But it wasn't sadness. It was joy so deep it felt sacred. Then Jenna took the stage. "My mother never set out to be a hero," she said. "She just chose not to give up. And in doing so, she became the reason hundreds of women, maybe thousands, are still standing today." She gestured toward me. "And tonight, we'd like to honor her the way Harold would have wanted." The music started. Unchained Melody. I gasped. The entire courtyard fell silent, except for the hum of the melody. Jenna reached out her hand. "Dance with me, Mom." I laughed through tears. "My knees might regret this tomorrow." She smiled. "Then let them regret it. Tonight we dance." We moved slowly, gently, like ghosts of memory and joy waltzing beneath stars. Halfway through, Brianna joined us. Then Ruth Ann. Then all the women. There we were. The broken. The rebuilding. The shining. Dancing beneath the moon with the ease of women who had carried sorrow and found beauty on the other side. And as the music swelled, I looked up. just past the lights, beyond the rooftops, and whispered to the sky. We never got to dance this one last time, Harold. But look at all these daughters. This dance, this one's for us. When the song ended, I closed my eyes, held on to Jenna, breathed deeply, and in that moment, I wasn't grieving. I wasn't surviving. I wasn't teaching or saving or remembering. I was simply alive. The seasons kept changing. Winters softened. Springs grew warmer. And life slowed to a pace I never resented. I spent my mornings sipping tea on the porch, my afternoons in the garden, and my evenings surrounded by memories that no longer hurt. The center ran beautifully without me having to hold it up. New leaders stepped forward. Brianna returned from DC with fresh ideas and a heart 3 sizes bigger. Jenna taught community classes on healing through journaling. I still visited on Tuesdays. Still sat in on group when I had the energy. But mostly, I let them lead. It wasn't letting go. It was watching something bloom exactly as it was meant to. One chilly November morning, I woke up before the sun. I sat by the window and watched the sky turn from charcoal to peach. I felt full. Not tired. Not scared. Just full. I pulled out my notebook, the one I kept for the words that only needed to be said once. And I wrote, to my girls, if you're reading this, then my journey has come to its end. But don't be sad for me. I lived fully. I danced until the last note. I loved hard, even after loss. You are my legacy. Every woman who walked through my door, every hand I held, every story I listened to. You are my forever. Don't let the light go out. Not ever. Because the world needs safe places. Soft places. Strong women holding each other up. Keep the porch light on. Always. You never know who might be searching for it in the dark. Love always. Maggie. I sealed the letter. Left it with Jenna's name on top. And that afternoon, I sat on the swing one last time. The wind was gentle. The marigolds were blooming, even in the cold. And for a moment, I could almost feel Harold's hand slip into mine. I closed my eyes, smiled, and let go. They found me peacefully, the letter beside me, the light still glowing above the door. And at my memorial, there were no black dresses. Only color, laughter, stories of healing, and music. They danced in the garden that night. All of them. And when Brianna stood to speak, she held up a small brass lantern, engraved with Maggie's name, and said, "She left us a light. Now it's our job to carry it." Years later, they turned the house into a refuge for young mothers. They kept the swing, planted new marigolds, hung Maggie's red scarf by the door. And every night, without fail, they turned on the porch light. Because somewhere out there, another woman was on the edge of breaking. And Maggie's light? It would always lead her home. To every woman who has lost, yet chosen to rise. You are not defined by what was taken from you. Not by the husband who left. Not by the home that vanished. Not by the nights you cried alone, wondering if your heart would ever feel whole again. You are defined by your resilience. By the way you kept breathing when the air was heavy with grief. By the way you stood even when your knees shook. By the way you opened your door to others when yours had once been slammed shut. This story proves one powerful truth. You are still standing. You carry the light now. Not because life was easy, but because you chose not to let the darkness win. So keep shining. Keep opening your heart. Keep the porch light on. Because someone out there is still finding their way home. And you may be the reason they do. With strength, with grace, with love. Keep going. Before I leave the stage, and begging you again, don't just watch. Make sure you subscribe to this Grandma Story channel and let me know where you're watching from the comments section. Thank you.